Fine. Mm, so in the last class, we were seeing pretty much from what is Maven, what is its architecture, uh, what are the standards, that is the directory standard that it gives, and we saw what is the life cycle that Maven uses by default, and also we saw some things about coordinates, how Maven tries to access the plugins, right? So keeping those as the background, let's get started practically, and let's try to work and see how Maven works for a complete Java-based project. So the first thing what you can do is you can download Maven. It's not actually an installation. There's just a distribution available, which means it's going to be available in the format of zip file or tar file. All you have to do is download and extract it to a particular directory. Okay, so if you just go to the Maven download or the Maven site, you'll be getting the links here. So now here there are two ways of downloading it, which means that either you can get the complete source or just the binary. Okay, source is required by someone who is interested to modify the behavior of Maven. So like after the class you have gone through and you know Java very well. In case you feel that there is some automation required or you need to change the behavior of some step, and you can do it. So basically, as I said, Maven is completely written in Java. So if you download the source, you will get all the Java files also, which will be going to create the Maven executable. So using that, you can change the behavior, but we are not focused more into the development. So you can download any one of this, specifically Mac or Windows, and based on that, you can work. So you would have extracted this to a directory, right? That is what we just need to know. So once you download and extract this contents of the archive, so we need to set up some environment variables. So that is what is very important. Okay, now the question comes, what are these environment variables and why do you have to do? So it is because when you're logging into a particular operating system, you should be able to access all this commands, whatever you're trying to do, by all the users. So that is the reason we set everything in common using something called as environment variables. So rather than I using some value, I put it in terms of environment variables, which can be accessed by all the users who are all going to log into this particular system. Now, for this, what and all is important. So as I said, Maven is going to run on Java. We need to have Java installed in the system. So the first thing you need to know is you need to see and check whether Java is installed. So Java home is a environment variable which specifies where we have installed Java. And right now, this is the place where we have installed Java. And we have Java 1.7079. That is where we have installed it here. Now the second thing what we need to do is we need to create an environment variable called m2 home. So now where does this m2 home points to? Let's see that. Okay, so m2 home points to a directory where we have extracted the contents of the Maven, which means you would have downloaded the zip file, right? So if you have extracted that zip file, this would be, I have extracted the zip file to this particular folder. And if you see inside it, it will be containing a folder called bin, lib, and some configuration files. Okay, so inside this bin, if you see, this is where the path and this is the executable what we'll be accessing. So if you see, m2 home is nothing but the place where you have extracted all the Maven files, or simply I can say that is where you have installed Maven, which points to the Maven home. Home in the sense that is where defaultly it will be checking for all the files related to its usage. That is binary files, library files, everything will be present inside this. So this directory points to the Maven home, and that is what we will be putting the value as m2 underscore home. So m2 underscore home points to that directory where you have extracted the contents of the zip file. Okay, and after that there is one more variable called m2 home. And if you see m2, sorry, it's not m2 home, it's just m2. Now m2 variable will be pointing to which path? So if you see, it is pointing to the bin directory of m2 home. So I can simply say m2 is nothing but bin directory of m2 home, and m2 is what exactly Maven will be using to pick the Maven file and run. You're getting it, because the MVN which I showed you yesterday, that is the exact executable which you'll be using for Maven. And where is that present? It is present in the Maven homes bin directory, and that is the another environment variable which we need to set. Okay, and once this is set, there is something called Maven options. Now, this is not important for general usage, because only whenever you are working on some XML files for your web application, it gives you a certain format of writing it. So only in those cases you might be using. So other than that, this will not be so important. Even if you don't set, it will be okay. Now, is it required in production to do? It is completely dependent, and if it is required, the developer will let you know that we are working on a web application style and we need these kind of XML options to be passed to Maven. Okay, suppose if you want, you can set that also. And don't worry, if in case even if you don't set for your practice, it is nothing going to do. Basically, it's not even going to stop the behavior of the Maven. It is only when you're trying to work on a web application building using Maven, it would add some values to the XML files. That's it. Okay. And finally, we have something called as path. So, okay, the question comes, you guys know what is path now, right? Why do we use path variable? Hello?
Sir,
Sorry, I didn't get you, Vinay.
it's a reference.
It's not exactly called as reference. If you remember, I would have told in some other class. Okay, so what happens is, now whenever I type some command like this, or if I type some command like this, what am I doing? I'm just invoking the executable. So when I invoke the executable, how does the operating system know where this is? I mean, where this is present. So for that, what we have to do is, so there is an environment variable called path. So if you go here and give the complete path where your executable is present. So for example, I have to run Maven going forward. And where is that present? It is present in this location, right? Like this, each and every executable, we have to keep the path inside this variable called path. So only then the operating system will be able to find out. So if you have not given here, and if you type some command, this is how it will be recognizing. Suppose if I had a environment, sorry, if I had a binary called askj, I need to see where is the complete path it is present, and I have to add this to the environment variable called path, so that the next time when I just enter this, it will go and search for all the paths which is present here, and if it is found anywhere in any of the directory we have added, from there it will run. So it is important that you need to add this particular path, because this is where our Maven executable is, right? To the path variable. Is that clear? Hello?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Okay. So now, what are we going to do? So now, like I said, uh, to work on Maven, we need to follow some certain structure. That is the directory structure. Like yesterday, we saw something like src main or src test, and after that, I said we need some file called pom.xml, only through which it is going to understand your project. All those things. Now, if you are trying to create all those things, basically, then the difference between other tool and Maven is that you need to understand what is POM and all those things. But instead of that, in Maven, there is an option where you can create a freestyle project. So what do you mean by freestyle project is it is going to create a dummy project for you which will have all the required directory structure, and it will have the pom.xml which is going to work as a base for all the projects. Okay, so it is like it is creating you a template and it is giving you. So all you have to do is use the template, and top of that, if you want to do any modifications, you can modify. Now, do you think that is better for us, or we need to create everything from the scratch? Yes, if we know how to do it, we can do. But for the beginners who don't know anything to learn, don't you think it is always better to have something ready-made wherein if I just give some option, it will create a dummy project for us. So that is what we are going to do for the first class to understand. Then based on that, we will try to learn each and every concepts internally. So we are not going to create the source directory, everything from the scratch. Instead of that, we are going to create a dummy project, which is going to have everything being set up from our place. Now, as I said, Maven is reusable. So even if you have to create a new project based on that, all you have to do is just copy paste the entire contents. The only thing you will be changing is whatever the source files you have inside will be modified. So how do I create those kind of things? Now in Maven, there is something called archetype generate, or for now, you just assume that there is an option called archetype generate. That means architecture type generate. So it is saying that to the Maven that create or generate a project of a specified architecture type which we are going to run now. So basically, whenever we are going to run this, it is going to ask us for the details. Okay, so now I'm creating it freshly. So see what and all it runs. So basically it is saying that we are running in the interactive mode, and it is going to ask us some options. Okay, I hope you guys can see this, right? Okay, now it has stopped at some place and it is asking some values to be entered. So what is this value? Can you guys see this?
Yes.
Okay, so now, like I said, it is asking for some architecture type. So what it means is, now when I say Java based projects, it's very a simple word which means Java based project. Now there can be different types of architectures of the Java project, which means your Java project can be servlets, a simple thing like Java Beans or NetBeans, right? Servlets, or you might be creating specific web application, or say that you want to work on a Selenium based project. So like this, there will be multiple types of projects which is be specific to what kind of product that you're going to release, right? So in those cases, we need to pick up a particular number which will be helping us to create the project type. That means it is be helpful for us to create the dummy project what we are going to create. But if you see right now, we don't know anything of those type. Okay, so now what we are going to do is we are going to create the default type whatever Maven is going to give, so that it is a standard what we are going to use. Using it further, we can modify anything that we need later. So now how will I know what is the type of architecture? In the production, the developers or whoever is going to give you the task of creating the Maven projects or maintaining, they will let you know that this project is of this type. So based on that, all we have to do is choose a number. But this is only when you are creating a freestyle project from this option. If not, you can always copy paste the existing project and modify based on what is your need. So now I'm going to go with the default number 653, wherein it is just giving me a freestyle project. And if you don't enter any value, and if you press enter, by default it will be taking the default value itself. And now it is asking what version of the particular quick starts version what we are using, that is the archetype. So again, we don't have to literally bother about what version it is. You can go ahead. Okay, now comes the important part. So yesterday we spoke about GAV, right? That is through which Maven is going to recognize all the plugins, and also it is going to recognize its own project. So now if you see in those terms, here it is asking for the first value of group ID. So group ID is nothing but your company name, or is it your business unit name, whatever that you want to give, can give. So now we can say uh, okay, so now I'll say my group is September 22nd, because it's just the batch which we started, so I'm just using that name as the group ID. Okay, then it is asking for the artifact ID. So what is the artifact ID? What is that we are exactly trying to build? So some deliverable name. So I'm gonna give it as demo. Okay, it is just the name of the binary or the deliverable or artifact which we are trying to build. Okay, then finally, it is going to ask the version number. So now here the version number, it says something like 1.0 snapshot. That is a default value. Yesterday I said it will be a 3-digit value like this 1.0.1, something like that, right? So for now, you don't have to worry about this. You just use whatever is default. I will explain you why we are doing this later when we finish all these things. Okay, and finally, it is asking you what exactly you are trying to create. That is, a package means in Maven what kind of deliverable it is. That is, do you want to create a jar, do you want to create a var, or do you want to create a EAR? So that will be the final output whenever you try to compile a Java file and give it to the customer or give it to the QA team, right? So in those case, now it is asking that what kind of file that you want to create. So by default, package is going to be representing jar. So even if I don't give any value and press enter, it is going to create a jar file based on this for this project September 22, it will be creating a file called demo.jar. Okay, so it is just confirming us all the value. Okay, so if you see, it has completed and it has created. Fine. Now let's go to this particular directory and see what it has done. So if you remember, I just created a dummy directory here. So if you go inside this, what has it done? If you see, it has created a folder called demo. And what is it? It is the project on which we are going to work and practice on. Okay, so the first thing, if you see what it has done, now what is demo in turn? Demo is the workspace on which we will be working on. So it is just like we have obtained this set of files from a Git repository or a separate subversion repository or a purpose repository, because this is how a developer would have written files and we would have stored it. So now either we can create the workspace by cloning a particular repository. If not, for practice, in order to know how it will be in the beginning, we have created a quick start session, which means using a quick start session, we have created a freestyle project. Okay, now if you see, this has a file called pom.xml. Now this is the configuration file which is going to explain all those things about what is this project, how is it going to be. Now if you go inside, do you remember in the yesterday's class I was saying the standard which we will need to follow is the directory structure, in which src is the folder what you need to have, and inside that you will be having one folder called main, one folder called test, where main will be containing all the files related to your project, or it is going to contain all the source code exactly for your project, wherein the test folder is going to contain all the files related to the unit test, that is the source code related to the unit test of what files you have inside this. So now let's go inside it and see. So you see, it is following the same structure what we saw yesterday. We saw this, right? Src main Java. So we have src main Java, and if you go inside Java, for clarification or for better confirmation, it will put a folder called September 22. And what is this? This is nothing but, what is this? It is the group name what we have given, right? That is the group ID is September 22. So it is creating a folder called group, that is September 22, and inside that it will have all the contents of the file, which means here we will not be having directly files inside Java. Just to be sure what project you are working and what group ID, we will be putting the name of the group ID inside this, and we'll be storing all the files there. Okay, so now what is this file app.java? So it has given a dummy file or a sample file for practice. Okay, so the same case, if you go to the production environment, instead of this file called app.java, you would be having some Java file which represents your project, or you might be having multiple Java files in this folder. And this is the structure what a developer has to write a file and check it into the repository. So assume that once we create this folder, all we have to do is replace this app.java with our original source code or with our original Java files, which is going to represent the product. Okay. So don't worry what is the content, because we are not going too deep in how to write a Java file. Since rather than we writing a Java file, we are trying to use a quick start session or a dummy project which Maven is going to use. And the only thing is, say that if you know to write a Java file, you can replace this app.java with any Java file that you want to write. Okay, now if you go to main again, it has only Java files, whereas here I told you that you might also have resources filters. And now why is that we don't have here is, right now we are working on a simple project, so that is why we don't have anything. Whereas if you go in a production, the developer might be working on a web application or an enterprise application. So in that case, they will be having additional folders like this, and there will be some additional files inside it. Again, we don't have to worry anything about that, but only the understanding what we should have is we need to have the same directory structure. Okay, so now if you go inside src and you have one more folder test, and if you go and see, it will be following the same directory structure, test Java. Again, it is September 22. And now if you go inside, it has a test file. That is, this Java is nothing but a unit test file corresponding to which file? Corresponding to the src main Java app.java. So for that, you need a corresponding unit test file, and that will be put inside test folder. So like this, the very important thing what you need to know is follow this standard, that is the directory structure. Okay. Now, what is the advantage by following this is what we are going to see now. Okay. So now once you create the structure, okay. So once you create the structure, the next thing is we have to use it. So let's not focus about this. Let's try to practice on what options we saw yesterday, how it works. Then we will be going inside deeply. How do you modify each and every value? Now, all we did is we created one sample project. We created the structure automatically, and we have put some sample files, source files, which Maven itself is giving. So for now, for the demo or for our practice, we are set up with the Maven completely. Okay, so once this is done, what we need to do is first thing is ensure whether Maven is installed and working fine. So type Maven version and see whether it works fine. So it says that exactly this is the place where Maven is installed, and this is the Java version it is using, and it just represents what kind of architecture or the OS that you are working on. Okay, so once that is done, so you have, let's go inside demo. So you have this file. So again, when I was explaining architecture yesterday, I said always use Maven inside the workspace. So you have to run Maven only from a directory where you have all the source files. That is, wherever you have src directory corresponding to that, the pom.xml should be present, and that is where you should be running the Maven. Why? Because wherever direct, I mean, if you're running Maven from this directory, then Maven is going to search for a file called pom.xml in the same directory. So that is the default behavior of Maven. So that is why what we are going to do is now I am going inside this workspace or inside my project folder and trying to call Maven. Okay. So now what is that we are interested to do? Now we are interested to build the project because we have already written file or we have created one dummy file, that is the development has done. We need to build and check whether things are fine. So for that, what is that we have to use now? We have to use the life cycle which we saw yesterday, right? So what was the first thing that we need to do? We have so many options, right? If you see in the default life cycle phase, we have all these things. So now let's try one by one. So now if I say directly install, what is it going to do? It is going to do all those things from here to here, right? So instead of that, let us just check one by one and see how each step behaves. Okay, so the very first step what you have to do is compile. So now I am inside the project and I am just saying Maven compile. Okay, so what has that done? It has actually compiled some files. Now, what and all are the things to be noted here? Okay, the first thing here, what is that you see here? What is that you see here? What is this?
Plugin, compiler plugin.
Exactly. So now, so the first thing, if you see, it is generating the resources, whatever is required for building this project. And the next thing is you have specified as compile. So for compiling, or this is what? This is a goal that you are specifying the Maven to do some task. So corresponding to this goal, there is a plugin available. And if you see, this is the GAV, right? That is what we were seeing. So Maven tries to take a default compilation because we are not saying what compiler to use. Okay, that is the advantage of Maven. It is automatically picking up a default compiler which is present. Now, using that compiler, Now what did it do? It is compiled. So how did it know that we have to compile? And it is saying that there is one file to compile. That means what is the file that it would have compiled? This is the file, right? So anything that is source file should be present inside this directory. So automatically Maven will understand that if you follow this directory structure and if you store all your source code inside this, Maven will search for this directory in the parent directory of your workspace, and it will say that, okay, anything that you put inside this is called as source files for this project. And since you have only one file, it automatically picked it up, wherein we didn't say anything to it. Okay, so it automatically understands that if you follow that directory structure, all the files will be present inside that and it'll pick it up. Okay, so it has picked up one file and it has compiled. Now, if you see where it has compiled, in the parent workspace, you see it has created a new folder called target. And if you go inside, what is this target? It has created a class file and it has put the compiled file. Okay. Now, did we say anything to it? No. Automatically, Maven creates this folder. That is, it will go and search for all the Java files inside this folder, not exactly in this folder. It will be following up this directory structure. And from here, it will take the file and compile and put it into a folder called target classes and the corresponding name of your artifact. Okay, this is how it will be putting the files. Now, this is how when you say compile, it will be picking up the folders by default from the SRC structure or SRC standard directory structure what we are going to follow. Okay, is that clear? Now, okay, so we have compiled one dummy file. Suppose if the compilation was not correct or if it is failing, then it will throw an error here. So based on that error, you need to figure out what is the problem or go and get the help from the developer saying that I tried to compile this file and it is failing. Okay, so fine. So once the compilation is done, what is the next step? The next step is to do a unit test. Okay, so for that, what we have to do? Simply again, you have to say Maven test. And what is that you're trying to do now? You are invoking a goal called test for the project wherever you're working in. And what is it going to do? So if you remember again, first thing it is going to do is generate the resource, and after generating the resource, it is going to compile, and after compiling, what is it going to do? Then you have some app test.java, right? Inside the test folder, src test folder, we had one file called app test. What was that? That was again a source code for testing. That is a unit test code which correspondingly present for the actual source code in your src main Java folder. So now, in order to test that, again we have to compile that test file and run and ensure. So now in that case, it has compiled that file. So still, here we didn't say anything about how many files are there or where it is. Since we have followed the directory structure, Maven automatically picked up what? It has picked up from this folder, src test Java, and whatever you have, you had app test.java, so it has picked up and compiled. And now where will be the output of this? Again, it will be present inside the target folder. So now if you go inside target, you will have something called as test classes. Classes represents all the output of the files from src main Java, whereas test classes represents all the output files of src test Java. Okay, that means your test files. So it has compiled and it has put all these things here. Okay, okay, fine. Now, along with compiling the test, After you compile the unit test, what you need to do is you need to run this unit test and ensure, right? So that is what the next thing it has done. So it has run some unit test, and the output of the unit test, it is trying to put inside the target folder again. So everything, whatever you create during runtime, it will be present in a folder called target, and it is saying how many tests that you have run, what is the output of that, if there was any error, how much time it has taken, and it is giving you the complete results of that. The same thing, if you want to see, you can go inside the target folder, and inside the target folder you see something called surefire reports. That is the output of the unit test what you have done. Okay, so it will give the complete value whatever that you have given. So it has been stored here, and that is what it has been printed here onto the screen. Okay, at the same time, if you go to this XML file, it will give you the complete output of what and all tests that you have run. So it says that you have run one test called, this is the name, and what and all values that you have used, and what is the output that it is going to give. All those details, it will have been stored here. Okay, so this is what a developer or a QA will be using to verify. Again, we are interested more in the workflow, and I don't care anything about this output here. Now, if something fails here, what we have to do is you have to go back and report to the developer saying that this is failing. Okay, so now what test did is it did all the step. But now, if you see here in the compilation, it is saying something. So it is saying nothing to compile. What do we mean by that?
Has already compiled once, so it won't waste time in compiling it again.
Exactly. So how does it know that it is already present?
It already has a class file in
Yeah.
its folder, right?
So since
Something
it
like that.
already has, it is not going to do anything, because that is the intelligence that it has, instead of redoing everything, because every time you run these commands, it is again going to come from this step, right? So instead of that, it prevents that. Okay, so now once we have done this, the next thing is we have to create the actual output, right? We have created the class files. Now what is our interest? We are going to create the deliverable, or we are going to create the standard package, that is the jar file. So now if we go again here, and if you say Maven package, what is it going to do? It is going to again come from all the steps and create the jar, right? So see, first it has generated the resources, then it is compiling, then it is compiling the test code, then it is running the unit tests, and after that it is creating the jar, where it is using this particular plugin for creating the jar, because by default the package what we have used is the standard type, that is defaultly it will be creating the jar. And now where is it putting the output? It is putting the output into this target folder again. So if you go inside target, now you see it has created a jar, and the naming convention of this jar is, what was demo is the artifact ID, if you remember, that we had given, and it is following hyphen a name of the version what we have used, and I had used the standard version called 1.0 snapshot. Okay, I will tell you more when we go in the next classes about how do you modify the project based on your need and all. So for now, if you see, just understand that it will create a executable, or it will create a jar file with the name of the artifact ID hyphen version ID. Okay, so it has done all these things. Fine. Suppose if you want to do further install, then what is the install I said? You remember? Install is nothing but, suppose if any other project wants to use this jar file, then where will it search for? By default, it will search in the local repository, right? So in order to put the file from our local project or from our local directory to the local repository of Maven, you need to do the step called install, where install again it is going to follow everything, and once that is done, what is it going to do? It is going to copy the file to the local repository. See, it is trying to install the file to a directory. Okay, so now the question comes is, where is my local repository? So as soon as you have extracted the Maven files and you run Maven for the first time, what it does is it will create a folder called .m2. That is, every operating system for a user, you will be having a home directory, correct? So in the same case, now say that in this server, what is my home directory? This is my home directory. So here, if you see, what Maven does is, in your local home directory, it will create a folder called .m2. Okay, so now if I go to this folder, okay, I was just showing you this. So this is my home directory, right? So in this home directory, if you see, Maven would create a folder called .m2. Okay, that is what will be present here. So if you see here, it would have been creating a folder called .m2, and that is nothing but a folder which is used by Maven to act as local repository. And inside this, if you go, it will be storing all the plugins that you will be working. So every time you work, what it will be doing, it will be trying to check whether some file is present. If not, it will go to the internet to a remote repository which the Maven is maintaining. From there, it is going to copy and it is going to put all the files here. And now if you see, since we have copied it or we did the install, it would have created, see, September 22 is the name of our what? It is the name of our group, and demo is the name of our project, that is the artifact, and inside that it is going to copy all the files that we have done. So like this, it will be maintaining a structure for each and every jar that you are using. So whatever jar that we have used here will be present in this folder, and this is the local repository. So inside your home directory, it might be Windows or Unix, you can find a folder called .m2. In case if you're working on Mac, dot represents a hidden folder. Okay, so you have to search for the hidden folders and see that you will be having a folder called .m2, and all the files or all the plugins will be stored here. Okay, so whenever a new file is being obtained from the remote repository, Maven will copy these files into this folder, and this is where Maven will be picking up all these files when it has to run the project. Getting it? Hello?
Yes.
Okay, now okay, so we saw pretty much from installs because I'm going one by one. So deploy, I will tell you later when we are trying to deploy, because when you are trying to deploy, you need to configure some details with respect to which application server that you're going to do. So now don't worry about this. Just go through the others and practice how it is going to happen. Now, once this is done, I said we also have something called as clean phase, wherein clean means it is going to delete all those runtime generated files, correct? So in that case, what and all we have deleted, it is going to, sorry, what all we have created, it is going to delete. And is clean part of default lifecycle? That means if I run clean, will it run any one of this?
No.
No, right? So exactly. So if I run clean, see what is going to happen. So you see it has wiped out the complete target folder at all, because that was the runtime generated folder and it had all the contents. So this is how you delete, just to ensure that before creating a new build, it will do. So now if I have to do a build of the project, so every time rather than coming one by one step, I can directly call package, right? So that it will do all those things. It is not mandatory that you have to come and execute steps one by one. It is just for the demo I was showing. So instead of that, we can directly call one step like install or package that will do all the other steps from the beginning. So now if you simply say Maven package, it is going to do all those things. It was quite fast because there was only one file. In case if you had 10 to 15 files inside this src folder, then it is going to take some considerable time to compile, unit test, and create the jar file. Okay, so basically if you see, it was quite simple. Okay, now as I was saying, how does Maven know all these things? If you see, did we tell to Maven where is your source file? No. Did we tell to Maven how many source files? No. Did we tell to Maven where is your test files? No. Did we tell how many files are there? No. Okay. So it picked up automatically, right? That is because we were following the standard. Then did we tell to Maven where exactly to put the files? No, it did it by
No.
itself, right? And did we tell what to have to create? No. Did I tell you have to create jar? Did I say you have to create var? No, it took by default. Okay, and what is the name? That also it did. So if you see all those things, how does Maven understand that? So it is because of the configurations that is present in this file called pom.xml. Okay, so through the reference of this, it will be understanding your project. So that is why it is important that whenever you have this folder src structure, you should have the pom.xml in the same level, so that when you run pom, it understands that there is one more folder called src and you are maintaining every files inside it. So with reference to this, it will pick up everything here and it will work. Okay, so now if you go and see this content, so to do all those things, all those configurations should be present in this file practically, right? So that is why Maven is automatically picking up all those things, because it looks simple, but all those definitions should be present inside somewhere. That is what Maven will be understanding, right? So what do you see here? How big is this? Hardly we have not even 20 lines in it. Wherein if you see, all these things are default some values that it has given, so that we will see internally in the next classes. But if you see very close, what does this pom.xml contain? It contains nothing basically. That means this is the standard behavior of Maven, where even though you don't specify anything, all this pom.xml contained was what? See, this is the group ID, the artifact ID value we gave, the version we gave, and package whatever we said. It is representing it as jar, right? So this is the only value that we have specified so far, whereas all these things are the default values it is given, and it is nothing to do with what you have done so far. So, which means literally by having some 10 lines of code in the pom.xml, we can do all these things. That is, that is the default behavior of Maven and the beauty, wherein if you see, if you just follow the standard directory structure, and if you have one sample file called pom.xml without having any content, you can get your project working like this. You can do the build, you can run the test, you can create the jar or whatever is your executable. So now, don't you think at least little this is this much easy? Because if the same thing you would have done in Ant, you should have written at least some 100 lines of code for now. That is, first you have to say where is this folder. Second thing, you have to say where is your source file. For that you have to specify the directory structure, and then you have to say how many files are there inside it. Then after that you need to say what compiler to use, how to use. Okay, how do you have to run all those things? Then you have to say where is the output that you have to put. Then you have to specify the same thing for your unit test code, where it is, how to run the unit test, what compiler or what plugin you have to use for that, or basically what jar you have to use. Then where is the output you have to create. And then if I say create a jar, it doesn't know anything. Again, you have to say how to create a jar. To create a jar, again, you need to have some plugin to run and create the jar, where the output should have. All those things you should be specifying. Now, that is the advantage of Maven, wherein without saying all those things, if you can just manually create a directory structure, and you can create one pom.xml with just some simple values which is going to define what is this project, then it is sufficient for Maven to understand your project and do the build. So at least from that level, do you think it is quite easy? Because it looks so easy in what we do. Now, if you want to reproduce it or recreate, all you have to do is create a new directory, copy it, the same structure, and it will be working. That is the reusability. Right? See this, what is going to do. So now, if I go to demo here, all if I do just copy paste, right? I'll say demo 2. And now if I go inside it, let me delete this. Okay, so simply what I'm going to do is now see this. Now assume that I have modified the file here. Okay, I have again replaced some new content, or I have put some new file. So assume that I have done. Once that is done, I'm just going to rename this project. Okay, so I will not say this as a demo. I will say demo 2. Okay, now okay, this is done. So assume that I have replaced the content of the files, but I have followed the same directory structure, which is important. And we need a supporting file called pom.xml, which has all the configuration. But we are not going into that level now on what configurations we have to do, but we are just using the default configurations what Maven is going to give, because right now we are interested only to go through the workflow and understand. So for that, I have modified. And now if you go to demo 2 and run the same thing, that's it. You have actually set up a Maven project. It is as simple as that. So when you say you are setting up a Maven project, all you need is you need to follow the structure, have the files inside the right directory, and use a pom.xml. You understanding? So that is why Maven is so powerful, and it is quietly used by everyone. So this is how you should be practicing your Maven. So are we clear until this what we saw here? How Maven picks and how it is working? Any questions?
But I have one question, Adam, here.
Yeah, yeah.
So we have a Java file here,
Uh-huh.
and inside the source file, I seen app.java something else.
Yes.
How the compiler is Java compiler is going to create the compile, I mean state compile that particular file and creating the test folders over there. We
Not,
don't mention anything else, right?
yeah,
Can I
that
keep .NET file?
sorry, can you?
Can I keep a .NET file over there?
You can keep .NET file, but as I said, Maven is used only for Java. So by default, it will consider whatever that you are using is a Java based project, because see here, it is going to use a compiler which is specific for Java. So if you have to do all those things, then you have to manually modify the behavior. But if you try to do all those things, then it is equivalent to any other build tool like Ant, wherein you are instructing. So for .NET, we don't have any specific build tool like this. If the only build tool that you have for .NET is either you use Visual Studio, or we have something called as NANT. So in Ant, there is one more file called, I mean, one more build tool version called NANT, which will be used specifically for .NET. But Maven is mainly for Java-based system, because right now that is what is being widely used. And as you asked, in case if you have .NET, then you have to either use Visual Studio or a older version of files is of ant is what nant is being used for that. So if not, if you're using .NET, it will be maximum only on Windows, right? So in that case, you will be working on a support of Visual Studio, wherein Visual Studio has built-in files using which you will be running it. That is, there is a build tool called MS Build. If you're using Visual Studio, there is something called MS Build. So using which you have to define how to build, how all those things then happens, and using that you will be building your .NET project.
Okay.
And how Maven picks up, that is the internals of Maven, because all it asks you as a user is maintain this directory structure and have one configuration file called pom.xml, which will define how you have to work. Okay, so going forward, that is what we'll be seeing. So right now, what we are seeing is only the understanding of what is the life cycle of Maven, how it works. So now it will not be as simple as what we did now, because here, for example, it is using a default compiler, right? So instead of the default compiler, in my project, I might want to use a specific project, sorry, a specific compiler. So in that case, how will you change the behavior of Maven? Suppose I want Maven to do something else additionally, not just compiling. Suppose if you want to connect to a database as part of your build step, what will you do? Right? So like this, we might have to need to modify the Maven's workflow. So that is what is more configurable. But other than that, if you are going ahead with the default behavior of Maven, whatever we are doing is sufficient. That is, just create the directory structure, put a file called pom.xml, and everything should work in that. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Any questions? Vinay, Hemant?
No, good.
Okay. Okay. So now, as we saw, where will be your Maven repositories? So in Maven repository, how many repositories are there? There are two repositories. One is local repository and the other one is remote repository. So the local repository will be present in the user's default home directory. Inside that, there will be a folder called .m2, right? And now that is what we saw how it is going to store. Now, if you had a question on where is the remote repository from which Maven is trying to get all this file, this is the default Maven repository from where Maven will be copying all those plugins to your local repository, this place. And if you go to this, you see you have the same structures of plugin whatever we have just now saw in our local repository. So if you go inside it, you'll be having the versions, same ID, the jar files. So this is how it will be maintaining the repository in the remote. And since it is an open source, it will be maintained by Maven itself. Okay, so what Maven is going to do is every time it is going to search for a dependent plugin in this local repository. In case if it is not found, it will come to this remote repository, get the files, copy to this particular local repository and start using it from here. So when you are running your Maven project for the first time, so all these commands, if you are running it for the first time, it will take some time for Maven to run, or you will see that it is doing so many other things. That is because it will be trying to copy all those files or the plugins from the remote repository to your local repository. Getting it? Okay, and the same thing, whatever the quick start version that we used, that was an interactive mode. So instead of giving an interactive mode, what you can do is you can pass the group ID, artifact ID, and all those values as an options, wherein -d stands for the parameter that you pass to Maven, and what is the name of the what is it? What is the name of the value, I mean, parameter that you want to use, and what is the corresponding value? So something like this would be your group ID in actually production. It will not be just what we give. It will be com.mycompany.app, whatever it is there. Then artifact ID will be your what application that you're trying to use. Okay, and then if you want, you can give all these things as additional. If not, this much should be pretty much enough. So by passing this, you are saying that you don't want to run in the interactive mode. If not, it will be asking you all those questions like what we saw some time back. It will be asking you what is the artifact ID, group ID, and what is the version. Okay, so if we have understood from the basic behavior of Maven how we saw, the important thing going forward is how do I modify my project so that I work on some specific use case, or this is how I want to work. So if you have need, then all the configuration has to be done in the pom.xml, because right now pom.xml is very simple and it doesn't contain any data. That is because we are going and we are using the default behavior of Maven. But going forward in the production, it might not be as simple as this. So for that, we need to see what we have to do and how we can do it in Maven. Okay, fine. So when I'm explaining that, what you need to know is here the pom.xml is nothing but a XML file, right? So since the pom is a XML file, or all the configurations that you use inside the file should be in the format of XML attributes. So all those value that you gave will be present within the angular bracket like this. It will be present, and all the values should be present within the attributes what we will be using. So by default, this 4 lines is very important because this is what it is going to represent the GAV of this particular project. Okay, so using this GAV, Maven is trying to identify that this is a project and you have not given any value, so it is trying to assume the default behavior and works. So now once we modify the behavior, it will be different. Okay, so now all these things is what we saw. It is going to explain, the POM is going to contain basically what is your project, what kind of group ID, artifact ID, what kind of package that you're going to use, some description, all this default information that is going to have. But in addition to it, it is also going to tell if you have any dependencies in your project, what kind of dependencies you have, what and all you have to use. Because if you remember when I was explaining the first class for Maven, I said Maven also acts as a dependency tool. That is, in your project, if you have some particular dependencies, you will be specifying all those things. So we will try to do all those things in the next classes. Okay, that is what we are going to do currently. Fine. So until now, what we saw is basically from the behavior of Maven. But what is more important is how do I modify the behavior based on my need and modify. So to answer that, the question is that how do I modify the behavior? That is what the question I said. So you need something additionally to be done, not just compilation. So you need to run some database script, or you need to connect to some other server and do some other step. So in case if you have a requirement like that, so what Maven does is Maven will run everything through what? We need to pass a goal to Maven, right? So using that goal, there will be a corresponding plugin associated to it, and it uses the plugin and it runs. Now, until now, what were the goals that we were passing? It was the default lifecycle, that is compile, test, install, package. That is what the default lifecycle that we saw, right? Suppose if you're trying to do something new, then for that, Maven needs to know through plugin. That means if you use the default lifecycle, any plugin corresponding to it is default, so Maven automatically takes. Now, if you have to do something differently, then you need to instruct Maven what plugin that you have to use for that. So that is why Maven runs completely using plugins only. Okay, so anything that you want to do, it is through plugins. So now if you want to modify the default behavior of Maven, then you have to inform or instruct Maven to use the corresponding plugins. Okay, so in that case, how many types of plugins are there? In Maven, we have two types of plugins. Okay, so we differentiate the plugins in Maven as build plugins and report plugins. So what is the need of this? So build plugins are those plugins which are used to do the build activity. That is all those things we did now: compilation, running unit test, creating jar, doing install. So all those things are part of build steps, right? So by default, all those plugins, whatever you use to work on this, is what we call it as build plugins. And until now, we were using the default build plugins. And suppose if you have a need to generate a report, so when I was explaining Maven, again we saw one more feature of Maven is, along with dependency management, it also acts as a reporting tool. That is, you can generate some reports. So I'll let you know this at the end of the class because it's not so important. So the majority of plugins that you will be working on is build plugins, or I can simply say 99% you will be working on only build related things in your project, not related to documentation. So all those plugins, whatever you will be working on, will be build plugins only. So all these things right now we have used is the default plugins, but going forward, if you are going to modify the behavior of Maven for your project, then we need to specify a associated plugin, because only through plugin Maven will be doing all its work. So as I said, if you want to run some script, if I want to connect to some database, or if I want to do something else, then I need to define what plugin is used for that, and only through that plugin it knows how to connect or what it has to do. Then I would say that, okay, through this plugin, this is the final thing what you need to do. That is, for example, as I said, you want to run a Perl script or a shell script now in Maven. What will you do? Now for that, first thing you need to say, what is the plugin that you need to use so that Maven will understand that it is a shell script. Okay, so just like this, you need to specify the GAV of a plugin through which Maven knows that you have asked it to run some shell script. And then after that, if you say shell script, what exactly is the shell script, where it is, what and all it has to do, or what options it has to run, those details will be specified within the plugin. Okay, so pretty much I'll stop it for today, and what we'll